Hello everyone! Today we have a new toy line. I saw this little guy online and even though it was in the US, I had to have it because it's so cute. The name is Lucky and it is a SnuggleBumm dinosaur, part of the SnugglePets. There were 4 of them. Of course, I want them all, but let's start with Lucky. So Lucky needs some new hair, thorough cleaning, and I will also try to repair the tail. So I hope you enjoyed this restoration process and let's get started. The first thing I will do is remove this hair. And the reason I want to do this is because I think it's very difficult to try to comb this back into normality. This is very thin acrylic, I think, hair or nylon hair. And once it's gone, it's kind of gone forever. Just like it happens sometimes if you use yarn to make your hair, as soon as you start combing it, some of the strands just come off. And even if I want to replace some parts, I will still need to buy the material. I looked around and I found online a very good replacement. It's called Barceloneta and it's basically like a hairy fabric and it's used for pillows and blankets and costumes and jackets and it is a bit pricey, so I'm going to start thinking about ponies that use Barceloneta hair. Custom ideas more than welcome, but I think it will look quite nice. What I need to do now is to make sure there is no more glue in the head. It doesn't need to be perfect. I don't have to remove every single drop of it, but at least I need to clean the area where the hair will be glued closer to the face. I'm going to use a few different materials. I'm going to start with acetone that I know breaks down the glue, and I'm also going to use some sugar soap, which was very good when we did the deflocking of the pony. And while we are doing this cleaning, I will tell you a little more about this toy line. You might have heard of SnuggleBumms. SnuggleBumms were produced by Playskool in 1984, and they were these like little characters with long furry backs that you could brush. And they also giggle when you shook them and sometimes lit up when you hacked them. Very cute. Also really weird. And then on top of the original SnuggleBumms, you had the Royal Messengers. There were a SnuggleBug pair and 2 new puppy-like characters, which I'm just realizing, what if this is not a dino? It might be a puppy. Huh. The puppies were Lucky and Trusty, and the one we are seeing now is Lucky. And this is what it looks like once I have removed most of the glue, using mechanical means. So it's time to soak the poor dino's head into some sugar soap. I'm going to dilute this with some water, although I kept it quite pure, which might have been a mistake, I'm not sure, but it did work in the end, we'll see. I'm still wondering if this is a dog or a dinosaur. I think I'm going to leave dinosaur because that's what I would use to search for it, and this is also how I found the pictures online. Also, what dog has that tail? Anyway, we first do a quick nail test. And back to some metallic tools. Once I am satisfied with the amount of glue that remains, which is not that much, I'm going to clean the dino using soap and hot water. That's looking much better in my eyes. But we are not done because I also want the dinosaur to smell really nice, and I'm going to do my typical oxy action bath. And it looks like after a year of consistent restorations and cleanings, I have finally almost run out of oxy action. So to the makers, you know, if you want to sponsor me, just send me a message. And our dino is finally clean. Before getting into the repairs, I just want to use a little acetone to get rid of some of the marks. The stuff that doesn't come out with soap and OxyClean is usually more oily spots, like makeup for example, and acetone is perfect for those. Just beware, you shouldn't use it on any painted areas like symbols or eyes, and if you're going to use a lot, you should always use a respirator or work in a well-ventilated area. The next step is to deal with some of these areas that are a little more damaged. These include the tail, which has been consistently chewed for a few years, I imagine, and also some dents on the feet. The way I do this is I start by filing the area, then I use a bigger grain sandpaper, and I finally clean with a finer grit. Some of these areas could be filled up with epoxy putty, but when they are so close to the surface, I think it's better to just file them or sandpaper them. The result looks quite smooth usually. Now it's time to fill this poor tail that I feel has been chewed on for years. And for this I'm going to use superfine milliput. Make sure you mix the two parts very well. And then I just apply the milliput to the tail and push it with my fingers, then with some silicone tools, and I use some water to make sure the surface is very smooth. At this point it doesn't have to be perfect because I am going to use sandpaper afterwards, but I want to get it as close as I can to the final look of the tail. And once it has dried for about 4 hours, usually a little longer, as I said, will use my filing tools and my sandpaper and try to make it nice and smooth. And for a person not particularly known for their patience, this is the best I can do. Now comes the color matching. I was a little more confident with this one because I can definitely see that the skin color in this case is a little yellow with maybe a tint of pink. Lessons learned from my masquerade pony. This time I only painted the area that I had fixed with the milliput. I tried not to expand too much. I did a few layers, not as thin as I would have liked to. Another lesson learned. And I also wanted to paint the belly area, so the spots are a little easier to see when I paint those. Because there is this pink decoloration around them, and I want to see if I can hide that a little more. I used my gloved finger a lot to hide some of the transition between the acrylic and the actual vinyl. And this is roughly what it looks like once I'm done. I also retouched this foot a little bit because it has some pink as well. And a couple more layers for tail. Now it's time to paint some of the details like the nose, the markings. I'm not sure you can call these symbols because this is not a Hasbro toy. And there is also a heart, the tongue, and some freckles. And I did make an artistic choice, a conscious choice here. The original pink used for this dino is quite, how to say, light. And I wanted the markings and the details to be more visible. And I was also scared some of the regrind or those marks we have seen before might show through. So I went for a darker, slightly darker shade of pink purplish for all of these details. Can you say this is a restoration then, or is it a custom or something in between? I'm not sure. What I do know, this is silly, but what I do know is that I wanted to make this dino shine again, and I felt that if the markings were a little more prominent, then the dino would be happier. Yep. What do you think? For the eyebrows, I used my thin brush. These are the miniature painting brushes sometimes you ask me about. I find them under miniature painting brushes. Now for my favorite part, for the freckles, I'm going to use a tiny sculpting tool. Ta-da! Now it's time to glue the hair, finally. And I'm really excited because I love the color of this material, I love the way it feels, and it also reminds me of the trolls, the vintage trolls. So if I ever come across one to repair, now I know what material I should use. So first I used the mold of the old hair to cut the new one, and then I used some fabric glue to hold it in place. One important thing when working with this Barceloneta is to make sure that if you have to cut it, all the hair is like going in the right direction, because you might cut some and realize that you're actually also cutting the hair on the other side. So always pay attention to that. And this is the reason why I was using the comb. Now for the glue, with all my pony projects, I had been using PVA glue because it is water soluble, so that means it is reversible. And especially when I'm doing a restoration, I like the fact that you can actually change the work I have done on a toy or a pony. But in this case, I want to make sure that the hair doesn't come off. It is still removable, it's just a little stronger than PVA. And I think when I do customs, pony customs, I am going to switch to fabric glue. Not so much for restorations, I don't know, I have to think about it, but for customs, yeah. Fabric glue seems quite strong and I don't know, it's a nice material to use. Already when I glued the front of the toy, I was quite happy with the result. I had to try a few different things for the back to keep it all in place without bumps and weird things. This is the first time I do something like this, so it took me a little while, but I'm quite happy with the result. I just kept gluing the hair and pressing it in, and at some point it was all covered. Here is the before of our SnuggleBumm friend and the after. I think Lucky feels a little better after the cleaning and the new hair. Because look at that poor thing. It's really encouraging to see how easily you can remove some marks actually. It doesn't take a lot of work. This project didn't take too long. It was mostly just waiting for liquids to take effect and paint to dry. But yeah, I think it's a nice before and after, and I hope it encourages you to also try repairing toys like this instead of, you know, them ending up in the trash maybe. It's a really fulfilling hobby and you're also doing something good, I think, because it promotes reusing and recycling, even though I had to buy the Barceloneta, but I plan to use it on many projects, so get ready for all that fuchsia in the future. So thank you so much for watching with me, and I will see you in the next one.